Hello and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman. Here's what we're looking at. A plan to close and rebuild 2 Illinois prisons is facing pushback. Candidates for Chicago's first elected school board are lining up to get on the ballot. Our Spotlight Politics team on that and more.
On Route 66, he put his life back together.
And a new exhibition from a photojournalist with a deep connection to a famous roadway. And now to some of today's top stories. Technology is helping Illinois State Police identify witnesses or suspects in 100% of fatal interstate shootings. The agency says automated license plate readers, or ALPRs, have also helped track down witnesses in 82% of interstate shootings. Troopers enter vehicle registration information from the offending vehicle into the alert system, and officers could locate the vehicle within a few hours. ISP says through the end of May, the technology has been used in at least 260 cases. If you've been outside today, you've noticed it's still hot. 90-plus degree highs continue today and for the rest of the week, affecting tens of millions of people from the Midwest to New England. Chicago set a record high temperature yesterday, topping 97 degrees at O'Hare Airport. A bit of relief is expected for the lakefront on Thursday and Friday, but then the heat cranks back up on Saturday. Chicago has multiple cooling centers open across the city from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. at the locations shown here on your screen. You can also beat the heat at the city's public libraries and Park District field houses. Check out our website for more information. On the eve of Juneteenth, a state agency is announcing plans to hold hearings about reparations for Black Americans in Illinois who descended from slavery. The Illinois African Citizens Reparations Commission says the first of a series of public hearings will be held July 13th and feature speakers on the intergenerational impact of chattel slavery, racial terror, political disenfranchisement, and ongoing racial discrimination. The commission is responsible for making recommendations that address racial disparities resulting from slavery and its remnants. Up next, reaction to proposed prison closures in Illinois right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the Alexandra and John Nichols family, the Jim and Kay Mabee family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Plans to demolish and rebuild 2 Illinois prisons are generating pushback. Back in March, Governor J.B. Pritzker announced plans to close Stateville Correctional Center in Crest Hill and Logan Correctional Center in Logan County and rebuild them both. But not enough state lawmakers showed up Friday for a planned vote by the bipartisan advisory panel called the Commission on Government Forecasting and Accountability. Joining us now here with more are Colette Payne, director of the Reclamation Project at the Women's Justice Institute. Payne spent 2 years incarcerated at Logan Correctional Center in the late 90s. Anders Lindahl, public affairs director for AFSCME Council 31, which represents roughly 10,000 employees who work in Illinois prisons. And joining us via Zoom, Republican State Representative C.D. Davidsmeyer, co-chair of the Commission on Government Forecasting and Accountability, also known as COGFA. It's a bipartisan group of 12 state legislators tasked with advising over the planned prison closures. Now, we should mention we did invite the Illinois Department of Corrections to participate in this discussion, but they declined. We thank the three of you for joining us. Colette, starting with you, your work, the work that you do with the Reclamation Project and the Women's Justice Institute, you spend a lot of time with women who've been incarcerated, are incarcerated in Logan Correctional Center. Describe the conditions there.
Absolutely. So we have a bus service reunification ride where we take families to see their incarcerated loved ones monthly. And women talk about, you know, the living conditions, what it looks like to walk in your own waste. So the bag up from the sewage system, the mold, animals falling from the ceiling.
Animals having been on the roof.
I've
read reports about a raccoon on the roof that fell through.
Absolutely. And this isn't new to us. So It was in 2016, I believe, where I was the first woman, formerly incarcerated woman, to serve in this role, where I was part of a GIPA assessment, gender-informed practice assessment, where part of a team where we went in and spent 4 days gathering information, and a report was generated. Information as to how women are treated, the conditions inside, talking with staff, what do supports look like for them, because it supports on both ends. So after gathering that information, the Women's Correctional Service Act was passed, making sure that programming is gender responsive, trauma informed. And Juliana Stratton spearheaded when she was state legislator at that time.
Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton,
yes,
who still spends some of her time as Lieutenant Governor on re-entry issues. Anders, I want to get you in here a little bit. What do your members say about the conditions? Because these conditions are their working conditions. What do they say about these two prisons?
Absolutely. Throughout the state, there is a huge backlog of neglected, long neglected need for improvements and repairs. Stateville and Logan are badly off. We support rebuilding those facilities. What we oppose is the unnecessary and unnecessarily disruptive long-term temporary closure of Stateville that would close the facility for 3 to 5 years, and the closure and relocation of Logan to nearly 200 miles away. We think that would be disruptive for the individuals in custody, for their families, for employees and their families, and for our correctional system as a whole.
Right, and as you mentioned, there's the proposal would relocate Logan to next door to Stateville, basically, which is near Joliet. I want to come back to the two of you, of course, but State Representative David Meyer, you were quoted as saying that the current proposals are, quote, far from shovel-ready. In a statement, just to be clear, the Illinois Department of Corrections says that its goal, quote, in announcing its intent to rebuild Stateville and Logan correctional centers was to present a starting point and create an open process in which feedback from all impacted stakeholders is considered, not to present a complete plan without discussing it with all involved. Representative, where are the plans most deficient? What more do you need to see?
Well, I would say that the department and the administration came forward with an idea more so than a plan. They said they have no idea how long they'll keep Logan open. They're looking at closing Stateville as of September. Look, the reality is both facilities need to be rebuilt. Stateville certainly should be a major priority. The issues up there should be a priority. But you know, when you've got a trained staff in both Stateville and Logan Correctional Facility who are trained for that specific population, I think that we need to lean on that and make sure that those individuals have a say and have a part in the future of those institutions.
Colette, what were your reactions to plans to demolish and rebuild the prisons?
Logan in particular, I'm most definitely a proponent of the closure. I'm not for building more prisons. However, I think that women should be closer here, since most of them come from the Metro Chicagoland area.
And what is the benefit to being closer to Chicago?
I think the benefit of it is more programming. One, you have a lot of volunteers that don't even go down because of the distance. It's 172 miles away. It takes about 3 hours, 3.5, depending on traffic. The healthcare. You have, like, the healthcare system there is not good at all. I know from my experience, trying to get into the dentist, like the healthcare, to be frank, it sucks. And I think being closer to the Chicagoland area will have broad access to healthcare.
If I could just gently correct the claim about at Logan. Actually, 60% of the population of the women currently at Logan are not from Cook or the 7-county Collar area. So the large majority of the population is actually from central, southern Illinois, outside of the Cook and Collar area. It's absolutely important to have individuals in custody, women and men, close to their families. All of the data and the science has shown that. Close to their supports, getting good programming, getting good health care, getting good education, substance abuse treatment, mental health treatment, and those programs exist at these facilities. And as the representative pointed out, we've got great, skilled, experienced, and committed staffs. Closing their facilities is going to needlessly disrupt those.
Let's talk a little bit about, we've mentioned sort of the population and where some of them come from, because the state's prison populations, we all know that they are certainly lower than they were 10 to 15 years ago. Currently, at Logan Correctional Center, it opened by the state as a state prison in January 1978, but that building was built long before that, I think in the late 1800s. Its current population is 930, but its rated capacity is almost 1,400. And then for Stateville, it opened in 1925. Its current rated capacity is 850, but the population is only 421. Representative Davidsmeyer, if we have also heard reports that these prisons across the state are understaffed to the point where sometimes there is often limited movement for the people who are incarcerated there, why reopen the prisons? Or why, if we're going to relocate them, why not, or is there ever consideration about closing others and relocating the staff there?
Yeah, the reality is that if we didn't have crime, we wouldn't have a need for prisons. So if we can get everybody to get on board and stop committing crimes, we'll be perfectly fine. I think that's the lowered population is the lack of prosecution right now. Also, I will say, the Stateville plan, they specifically mentioned building a facility for 1,500 individuals. That's not a regionalized approach. You're going from a facility that currently has, as of last Tuesday, 423, I believe they said, were in that facility. And they're going to build a facility that's 3 times larger than that. It doesn't bode well for a regionalization approach that would allow individuals to be closer to their families. Logan, you've got exactly the opposite. You've got 1,000 individuals in that facility and a little over 400 individuals working there, whereas Stateville, you've got 400 individuals incarcerated and about 1,000 people actually working there. So, I think that we should look at any opportunity to maintain facilities or to build new where it's needed, but we have to focus on maintenance because the state of Illinois has failed on that.
Okay, a lot of questions. I wish we could talk about it a little bit longer, but I'm sure as this process develops, we'll have that opportunity to do that again. Thanks to the 3 of you for joining us, State Representative Davidsmeyer, Anders Lindahl, and Colette Payne. Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, a new push for public financing for city council elections. Our Spotlight Politics team on that and more right after this. Candidates lined up yesterday to begin filing the necessary paperwork to be on the ballot for Chicago's first elected school board. Meanwhile, Mayor Brandon Johnson launched a reparations task force, and the city's ethics committee chair calls for public financing in city council elections. Here with all that and more is our Spotlight Politics team, Amanda Vinicky, Heather Sharon. So Heather, let's start at City Hall. You were there this morning. A group of alderpeople and advocates for good government called for taxpayer money to be used to fund campaigns for city council. How would this work?
Well, essentially, it would give up to $200,000 to candidates who can prove that they can get a certain number of small donations from people who live in Chicago and specifically live in the ward that they want to represent on the city council. And this is really an effort, Alderman Matt Martin said, to get big moneyed interests out of local politics. And other people, including Elisa Kaplan from the Reform for Illinois group, which is sort of dedicated to sort of improving transparency and how Illinois' government works, said this would be a corruption fighting measure. And we all know 38 alderpeople since 1969 have been convicted of corruption-related crimes. She says that this will force people to essentially go door to door to fund their campaigns. And that means there is less of a chance of somebody sort of amassing a massive war chest and sort of using that to sort of, you know, do skullduggery, if you will.
Skullduggery. Okay, I'm not sure if that's a first on Spotlight. And there's never any corruption in City Hall. So Mayor Johnson made some headlines yesterday at the raising of the Juneteenth flag at Daley Plaza. First, he introduced his new chief equity officer and also announced the creation of a reparations task force. Though, Heather, the mayor announced that he was going to create this task force back in November. What's happening now?
Well, now they are actually getting to work, timed, of course, for Juneteenth, the anniversary of when sort of the Emancipation Proclamation made its way all the way to Texas. And this is really designed to start doing the hard work. What deserves reparations? Is it sort of a question of only descendants of enslaved Africans, or is it wider? And how will sort of the legacy of Jim Crow and sort of the systemic racism we're all too familiar with in Chicago be incorporated? And is it money, or is it education in the city schools, or is it sort of a leg up in getting business grants, or any of those things? All of those things are on the table. And finally, some work is going to be done.
Okay. Now, the state's also launching a reparations commission. Its first public hearing is in just under a month, July 13th at Kennedy King College. Amanda, briefly, what do we know about this commission so far?
Well, so there is that commission, which also was formed some time ago, actually back in 2022. And from what I can gather, there are actually some vacancies still on that commission. So it's getting its start a bit late. They're going to be going forward. This first hearing, as you noted, will be held in the city of Chicago, and it appears to be, it's supposed to be meant as an opportunity for folks to give their input, but it also is going to be, it seems like, some sort of lecture or learning of lessons, because there are a couple of professors that are scheduled to be present. And then there are additional committee meetings, or commission meetings, that is, that are scheduled throughout the fall. So similar idea here, where there's intended to be talk about how to make reparations, but that doesn't necessarily mean the classic sense of the word in terms of, you know, cash checks. It could be that, but it is still quite early. It could just be, again, educational opportunities. There are a lot of options.
And the other point here is that both of these agencies, the city and the state, are talking about reparations when 10 years ago, this would not have even been up for discussion at all, which is a thing, right? Heather, briefly tell us about Chicago's new chief equity officer, please, Carla Coupe.
So this is filling a position that has been vacant for some time in City Hall, and her job will really be designed to sort of tell Mayor Brandon Johnson whether the city is using its resources equitably or not. This was, again, one of those changes made in the wake of the police murder of George Floyd, as governments from the biggest to the littlest sort of started looking at itself and saying, are we doing this correctly? And this has been a spot that I think Mayor Johnson has a little bit trouble filling, and is now glad to sort of be able to sort of say, we found somebody for this position and now they can get to work, because there are equity issues across the city, ranging from planning and development all the way to zoning and to how the city sends mental health services to its communities.
So we mentioned candidates lining up yesterday morning to submit their necessary 1,000 signatures to get on the November 5th ballot to run for Chicago's elected school board for the first time ever. Heather, what sort of people are trying to get on the ballot?
So it's really the people who have filed already run the gamut, from sort of parents who just want to sort of improve their sort of area's education, as well as those who have been heavily involved in both the education reform movement, either advocating for sort of more resources, but there are also people who were on the sort of other side of the issue with sort of less control, top down, with sort of the charter school movement. And there are always, because it's Chicago, people who are aspiring politicians who see this as potentially sort of a way into the city's political life. Now, it's going to be a complicated election. There are 10 districts. They are each electing one person. Mayor Johnson will get to appoint another person to represent that district from basically a little bit of a geographically distinct area. And those 21 people plus a president appointed by the mayor will sort of govern for the next couple of years until the next election, when everyone will be elected, and the people of Chicago, like everyone else in Illinois, will be able to elect their school board members.
It's just a little complicated,
A little
Heather.
bit.
I'm glad you're following that one for us. Amanda, we, as we just discussed, the governor's plan to close and rebuild 2 state prisons, but the Commission on Government Forecasting and Accountability, or COGFA, didn't actually vote last week. Explain this process for us and why those members did not vote.
Well, there wasn't a quorum, and it appears as if there were some fairly legitimate reasons that legislators weren't at that commission meeting. And still, it is, I think, perhaps disheartening to folks who maybe work at a prison, who have a loved one that is housed in one of these facilities that they care about, or maybe a victim who wants to be sure about the whereabouts of somebody who was the offender that's behind bars because of that. So there wasn't a quorum. This was an advisory vote anyway, but this is a whole system that was set up after former Governor Rod Blagojevich tried to close a bunch of state facilities. Legislators got very upset about it and said, we want to have a voice. We need to have some influence in this process, and this is supposed to be the opportunity for legislators to get that information and to weigh in.
All right, we'll see what happens with them. That is Spotlight Heather Sharon, Amanda Vinicky. Thanks. Up next, a photographer who spent years documenting the reality of life along the famed Route 66. Stay with us. For Edward Keating, a one-off assignment to photograph Route 66 turned into a years-long labor of love. An award-winning photojournalist, Keating also had a deep personal connection to the famous roadway. Now, his work highlighting a more complicated side of the highway, memorialized in that famous tune, is being shown at Uptown's Chicago Center for Photojournalism. Chicago Tonight's Nick Blumberg has the story.
What could be more classic Americana than Route 66? One of the country's original highways, starting in Illinois and running through the Midwest, Southwest, and into California. But photographer Edward Keating didn't take such a rosy view of the roadway.
So it was really important for him not just to document the vistas and the beautiful backdrops of Route 66 from Chicago to LA, but really document the people, that many of whom were left behind, people that moved here for, with so many hopes and dreams, and a lot of those dreams were shattered. He wanted to document the reality of this highway, not just get your kicks on Route 66.
And for Keating, Route 66 wasn't just a highway. It was a place to heal while he was on the road during a chaotic time in his life.
He was about 21 years old with a major drinking problem, just finding himself on Route 66. And it was the place that he really hit rock bottom. But at the same time, not too long after that, on Route 66, he put his life back together.
He got sober and made a career as a photographer. Keating spent years on the staff of the New York Times. He worked for weeks at Ground Zero as part of its Pulitzer Prize-winning photography team.
It was nice to have that acknowledgement, but that's never why he did it. He covered the Kosovo War. He was always running after tough things in life because he just felt like someone had to document it, and he felt like it had to be him.
One of those things Keating felt called to document was the reality of Route 66. From 2000 to 2011, Keating made multiple trips, traveled thousands of miles, and took tens of thousands of photographs.
He actually didn't even develop a lot of the work. He always said that the best part about photography for him was just actually taking the picture, not even actually seeing the image in the end.
In 2018, Keating published the book Main Street, The Lost Dream of Route 66. He died in 2021 at age 65 of cancer he believed was from exposure to toxic dust at the ruins of the World Trade Center.
Before that, he stressed how important it was for him to show this work, especially along Route 66, because this work, he said when he published it in the book, he didn't own it anymore.
The Chicago stop is one of several exhibitions along Route 66 organized by Keating's daughter Caitlin, a documentary filmmaker, and his wife Carrie, also a photographer. Caitlin says bringing her father's work to galleries along the historic highway offers a chance to show the realities of lost jobs, limited opportunities, struggling small towns, and the sense of hope and humanity that pervades even the most challenging pictures.
Some of these images are really hard to look at, and I just hope that people really still take the time to look and don't turn away, because if we do, we're going to forget about the past.
So how does it feel to be here and see all this work up on the walls?
Yeah, I mean, it makes me feel so emotional. I got full chills when I walked in because, this is exactly what he wanted. It just means so much to my entire family. And the only sad part is that he's not here, but we know that he would be so, so happy with how it turned out.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Nick Blumberg.
Main Street, the lost dream of Route 66, runs at the Chicago Center for Photojournalism through July 29th. We have details on our website. And that's our show for this Tuesday night. Join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10 for Chicago Tonight Black Voices. Details on a new study that explores drastic economic inequities between white communities and those of color. And Juneteenth events are taking place across the city. We're live at the DuSable Museum. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm, and proud sponsor of programming that offers advice and strategies to enhance the physical and mental well-being of fellow legal practitioners in Illinois.